Of what we do, we're fully a part of the Research Council's energy programme, as are all the doctoral training centres, but we have a particular place within it. What we try to do, this is all the puff from our website about world-class research, but the gist of it is that we have an interdisciplinary research programme that tries to look at the energy system as a whole, and we're also very keen on inputting into policy efforts, which we think we've been reasonably successful at. The other thing we're asked to do by the Research Councils is to kind of act as the hub or the centrepiece of the Research Council's energy programme by encouraging networking and coordination activity within the programme. And I think these are some of the things that I would like to flag up. In terms of our organisation, myself and John Loughead, who spent most of his career at Alstom, he's the Executive Director, I'm the Research Director. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got 5 research themes that really guide the activity that we carry out in the UKERC. And to emphasise, we're not a physical centre, we're a centre that's a collaboration of different universities, and the headquarters at Imperial College, but other people are scattered around the UK. I think equally important is the question of the networking activity, which is sort of in the column just to the right of the middle. And just to flag up a couple of things there that are relevant, we have a facility called the Meeting Place based in Oxford, which is where we do our networking activity, and anybody is free to propose workshops and activities that the Meeting Place will resource, as long as it benefits the UK energy research community as a whole. I'd flag up the National Energy Research Network, which you can go to our website and sign up to, and you will get regular newsletters there, information about jobs, opportunities, conferences, etc., plus the very entertaining blogs by our network managers, which usually is the most popular part of it. And just below that, I'd also flag something called Sparks, which is our network for younger researchers, effectively, PhDs and earlier postdocs. And there we give them a budget to self-organise meetings effectively, to get together in a network. And they very often ask people, civil servants, to come along to address the meetings and then give them a hard time. So effectively, if you want to get involved in that, you're very welcome to do so. And I don't know if anybody's busy on Monday, but the next meeting is actually on Monday at UKERC's headquarters at Imperial College down in London. So I thought I'd just do that quick advertisement. These are the people who are the co-directors who are responsible for each of the individual research themes. And one point I just wanted to flag up, you can see who they are, I won't run through it all, but just to flag up one thing that we're very determined to do is that the people shouldn't be working in silos, that demand isn't separate from supply, for example. So a lot of the research effort we have going is about collaboration between themes, between demand and supply on things like smart grid, electric vehicles, penetration of electricity into markets, more demand-side management. And there's collaboration between the energy systems and energy and environment themes on looking at consumption-based approaches to the UK's greenhouse gas emissions, and these are consumption-based emissions have been going up rather than going down in the UK. And finally, I'll just pick up the technology and policy assessment, because that's where we've had the big sort of press and policy impact. It's not new primary research. The people take really difficult and controversial problems in the energy area and subject to the existing literature to a very systematic review. So they've recently tackled topics like global oil depletion, the escalation of offshore wind costs, the energy efficiency rebound effect. If it's difficult and challenging, they're up for it, and we have a lot of impact with these reports. The global oil depletion one, in fact, broke our website. There were so many people trying to download it all at one time. So if you can tolerate the 200 pages of closely reasoned argument, that's the one for you. Right, I'll move on now to the UKERC Energy 2050 project, which was the flagship enterprise of UKERC Phase 1. And just to say, this project had 2 purposes. One of them was obviously to answer all sorts of interesting questions about the UK's energy pathways out to 2050. But there was also a selfish reason for doing it, because halfway through UKERC Phase 1, we realised that our plans for getting people to work together in an interdisciplinary way were not working properly. And we invented this project partly as a way of forcing people to work together to define research objectives that could only be met if people collaborated across disciplines and across institutions. And obviously, in one sense, that was a risky activity, but we think we probably pulled off about 80% of the aims we had at the beginning of the project, and we have now built these interdisciplinary habits of working off the back of this project, which was the purpose. So what I'll do is I'll just pick up a few of the topics. I'll explain how the project worked. We had core scenarios, but then we explored a lot of topics in greater depth. So what I'll do is I'll first of all give you an overview of the project, and then what I want to do is I'll just focus on two of the themes that we explored in a bit more depth. We don't have time to go through all of them. So I'll cover energy system resilience. I'll skip lifestyle change, or I'll be happy to talk about it in questions or informally later. Cover environmental sensitivities, and then some final messages. So the way we started about the project, the way we held it all together was to define a set of what we called were core scenarios about the UK's and possible UK energy futures through to 2050. And carefully listening to what politicians were saying and the way the government was driving things, we thought that there were two big concerns that were really driving energy policy. One was obviously the low carbon agenda, the problem of dealing with climate change, but the other one was the increasing concerns about energy security, particularly because the UK has lost its self-reliance in energy. We're now becoming big net importers of both oil and gas. So in business school style, we took these two attributes of the energy system, low carbon, what we called resilience, which I'll come along to, and created this kind of 2x2 matrix for scenarios that would frame all of the efforts that people were carrying out. And you can see very simply how this falls out. There was the reference scenario, top left-hand corner, and that's not a forecast. It's not something we think will happen. It is just that, a reference scenario, a baseline from which you measure other kind of efforts. And that baseline was based on what we called firm and funded policies that were in place in the Energy White Paper that was published in 2007. That was roughly when we were getting the project off the ground. We had a low carbon scenario, which at the time we started, the UK's objective was a 60% reduction in CO2 by 2050. It changed to an 80% reduction in the middle of the project. But fortunately, being a member of the Committee on Climate Change that recommended the 80%, we had a little bit of hint earlier on about what was going to happen, and were able to have a little part, what if it went up to 80% scenario up our sleeve that enabled things to carry on. On the top right-hand corner, we had a scenario where we ignored all the carbon objectives and just said we want to make the UK energy system more secure and resilient. And what that means, I'll come along to. And then the bottom right-hand corner, we had a low-carbon resilience scenario that covered both the security and the low-carbon aims. And obviously, one of the big questions we're trying to ask with this, are the policies and measures that you need to achieve to get a low-carbon economy the same as the ones that you would put in place if you wanted to achieve energy security? And what might you do different if you wanted to achieve both these aims at the same time? So the core scenarios, there were certain common assumptions that underlay all of these four different scenarios, and we held these constant. So economic growth, we thought that the UK economy has been growing at 2 to 2.25% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We thought that we rather wanted to assume that this growth would continue into the future, though the composition of the growth might be different. We took global energy prices at around $70 a barrel, which was roughly in line with the medium perspectives of the International Energy Agency at the time. And then we have a set of common assumptions about the availability of energy resources, technology performance and costs. And very importantly, because this drives a lot of the way that the modelling works out, investment criteria based on the way that a real private investor might judge an investment, not the social discount rate that the Treasury used. And as I mentioned, the firm and funded policies in the 2007 White Paper. Things that varied between the core scenarios that we played games on, first of all the carbon constraints. In relation to security, we played with levels of demand reduction, and we also played with constraints on the energy mix to try and drive diversity in the more resilient scenarios. And some of the policy assumptions